Welcome to AP European History with Dr. Brovkin. Today we continue our discussion of La Belle Epoch. Last time we discussed the philosophy and literature, and now we continue with the analysis of painting, art, architecture, dance, ballet, music, and other forms of art. And we move on from philosophy to, let's say, painting, art, and architecture. And this is a little less explicit, but it also could be said that this is about passion and about the unseen, about the realization of human passion in a painting. In other words, from a realist painting, you have a transition to impressionism. Impressionism is a first step actually towards the irrational. This is going to be the explanation for you. Impressionism means that what you have to see is not the realistic representation of reality as the realist art of the 19th century, but a feeling about it, an impression of it, something that is not seen but imagined or caught in a moment of passion. And from impressionism you go to post-impressionism, where you have even more of a feeling and a passion which becomes a centerpiece of this artistic creation. Well, obviously we can mention Manet, where he's quite realistic, but again a rebellion when there's a naked woman in the outside in the picnic. But this is like a first step of a rebellion. The rebellion would escalate into showing Cézanne and Van Gogh and Pissarro when you have true impressionism in a sense of fleeting images of subconscious, if you speak in the Freudian sense, fleeting images of subconscious that are parts of reality but not real reality. And then it goes from post-impressionism even further, and if we talk about Picasso and the beginnings of abstractionism, what you see in these paintings is a human figure falling apart like a nuclear explosion. It's just falling apart, and that's the cubism. This is like 1910, 1911. Look at Picasso's paintings, or the greatest Russian, actually they turned out to be the greatest Russian avant-garde paintings, Malevich, where he goes even further into this absurdity of fleeting images and creating his famous black square, which is like a black hole, which is like a window into the subconscious, which is not really in any sense a representation of reality. What it is a representation of the subconscious, and that's what the avant-garde and the breaking apart into the cubism and then into Dadaism, and then finally in the 1930s the abstractionism. And again here one of the famous ones is Vasily Kandinsky, who is a Russian painter who lives in Berlin. Now that's very briefly sort of the explanatory thread, but again how it is connected with the Belle Epoch, it's the analysis, or rather the celebration or the study of the subconscious, the study of passions, and the study not of reality as it is, but reality as it is imagined, or as it could be, or as something that is underneath the surface. So that would be briefly about art in the Belle Epoch. Now, a parallel to that would be experimentation in architecture. This is probably the most beautiful and the most revolutionary period in architecture, because again, it starts out with the realism, with the kind of a rational classical features of the early 20th century, celebration of Greek forms in that 1830s, 1820s. And then it moves on to a more kind of classical, neoclassical architecture that the demand is for big apartment buildings. And you've seen many of those that are lined up along Nevsky in St. Petersburg, everyone different, everyone beautiful, everyone different colors and shapes, and yet it is still rational because it has the columns and the windows and the geometrical forms that are rational and explainable. But then you move on to Art Deco, or Art Moderne, or Jugendstil as it is in German. And this would be the third of the century, which is very ornate and very kind of almost Baroque style, but in a new ways with leaves and things. They're beautiful examples of Art Moderne architecture in Paris, especially in Paris Metro and in many other cities. And that goes with this kind of a rejection of the rational Greek forms and the rationality of architecture of the middle of the 19th century into the unknown, which is the passion and love and search of new forms that takes a variety of directions and finally leads to the post-Art Moderne, which is 1920s and 30s, which gets into the celebration of technology, steel and glass and new cubic forms, and that goes very well with cubism in art. And if you look at architecture of the 1920s, which is weird cubes and glass and forms that dominate the field, that goes so well with the cubism in art, where you have decomposition of objects into its geometrical forms. One of the most interesting things about La Belle Epoque is the exhibition which was in Vienna, I believe in 1908, and that's called Gesamtkunstwerk. And I think it's hard to translate, but what it actually could be translated as the composed piece of art. And what they did, it was a bunch of artists and architects and musicians. They decided to experiment and to create in one place a piece of art that would combine in itself everything. It would be architecture, and it would be art, painting, it would be murals that are painted, it would be the physical shape that you walk into this building that is architecture, and all of it is attacking you as a spectator, and then there's music of Mahler in it. In other words, all your senses are involved at the same time. You hear the music, you see the walls, you see the paintings, you walk into a building which is a work of art in itself, and they call it Gesamtkunstwerk, which is the combined work of art, which is very, very important because it shows to you that La Belle Epoque is the integration and disintegration at the same time. The falling out of the geometrical pieces is the disintegration, like an explosion. But at the same time, you have integration, when you have the same trends in philosophy, in literature, in poetry, in architecture, in art, and of course in music, that are all about the celebration of the rational. I cannot fail to mention the most important in music and dance. It is also where the Russians lead the way to the present time, and it happens with the tour in Paris of the famous ballet Russe that comes to Paris with the choreographer Diaghilev. And again, it's a total rejection of the traditional ballet that you have seen in St. Petersburg, of the Swan Lake. It is like the opposite, and these are new movements and a totally new physical expression through dance that really gave rise to what today we would call modern dance. It's another rebellion, it's another rejection of the classics, it's another search of absolutely new, and it's also a kind of absurdity and celebration of passion that unifies the themes in dance and in music from of this age. In music, it would be obviously Stravinsky, you listen to this music, it sounds weird. Well, that's what it is. It's this weirdness that unifies a lot of artistic trends of this time. Now, obviously, I could speak much more about all this, but I hope I've given you at least a glimpse of the fascination of La Belle Epoque. That this is why it's probably the most creative, the most artistic, the most beautiful, the most advanced, the most everything period in European culture. Thank you.